to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Dan and Alyx are going to be joining us again next week. They're taking the week off and getting some stuff done. Alyx in particular, because of course she's got her upcoming nuptials happening in October. So we're looking forward to that. But we are not left bereft today. We have a special guest, Cassie Parks, who is a professional coach. She actually retired when she was 32. Not many people get to claim that. She also is the author of 7, I believe, best-selling books. And she has a course, or I guess a program called Manifest 10K that she's going to tell us about, which has a very interesting little piece attached to it. You don't pay anything unless you actually make money. Very interesting. So Cassie Parks, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I always love joining fun, happy podcasts and talking about the law of attraction. So I'm excited.
Well, you are in the right place. We are all about the fun here. This is a very good thing. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah. So I always tell people ask, like, when was the first time you manifested money or used the law of attraction? I was 13. It was in choir. There was a fundraiser, and if you sold so many things the first night, you could get entered into this drawing for $20. And so, yeah, I was like, I want the $20.
There you go.
So I went home and sold the things, and I visualized, sitting in class and seeing my teacher pull out a name and hearing my name. And the next day I was the third person called. And I would love to say I was, manifesting genius since then, but I did what most people do. It's really easy that first time. And then we kind of start to get in our own way. And I would say it was probably, 15 years until I started really leveraging the law of attraction in what I call the right way. I definitely have 2 phases of my life when I was thinking I was doing it right and when I was doing it right.
I got to ask you something too. It just came, I don't know why this even came to me just now, but it did. Because of course we've been manifesting all of our lives. And,
right.
and you used a phrase that I think everybody who's ever explored this topic uses, I manifested for the first time. Well, we've been manifesting since we were born. The problem isn't that we weren't manifesting. The problem was controlling it, getting control of the steering wheel. And I'm wondering, when did you first grasp that idea that we've been manifesting all our lives and I just have to learn how to do it properly, the way I want to do it, the way I want to get?
So I say that with money. When did I grasp that we could do,
or with anything? It doesn't have to be with money. It can be with
anything. I believe, and like a lot of people, I think I believed it. So I believed way before, like when The Secret came out. I mean, I was younger, but I already had that concept. I was studying some different things about thoughts and beliefs, and I had done different things, but that it was, so I knew, but like that moment that I was like, oh, I can do this is probably when I manifested retiring from my job.
Okay.
Like where it's solid, because everybody, like anyone listening was like, oh yeah, I know that's possible. But I think there's such a difference between knowing it and like getting it internally.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's almost like you described it as getting out of our own way, and that's a great way to describe it. It's the learning curve is more about learning that I really can trust this crazy thing. In fact, one of my favorite topics lately has been people who want to apply the law of attraction. And I always chuckle a little bit at that thought, because it's like trying to apply the law of gravity. I mean, we don't wake up saying, okay, I'm going to manifest keeping my feet on the ground today. I mean, it's just part of the conversation.
Right?
But we want to do this special thing with law of attraction. Like it's not the law of the universe. It's something we have to actually grasp and we have to pull into our lives, or else we won't actually have it, which isn't true, of course.
Right. It's there, whether we're consciously guiding and using and leveraging or not.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I was kind of chuckling at all that, but anyway, all right. So we have a little idea of how you got started, but when you got to the point where you decided you wanted to retire early, and in your case at age 32, which is cool. Kudos to you for that one. That was pretty hot. So tell us how that went. How did that go?
Yeah. So I had been trying to manifest, right? Again, like you are, or it's always working. You're not really trying, you're inputting the right data or you're not. And I had been trying to build my business to leave my job. I wanted to have a coaching business. I wanted to be a coach. I'd always thought I wanted to be a counselor. When I started to become a counselor, I realized there had to be something faster and I wanted to be a coach. And so I was pushing and pushing and pushing and trying to manifest like my coaching practice being full in order to leave my job. And there came a point where I got tired of that. And I remember just sitting, it was like, it wasn't fun.
Which is important. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's so important. I was pushing so hard, not having any fun in order to get to a place where I could have fun.
Right?
Yeah. After you do it, it seems so obvious. But when you're in it, like I just got to keep pushing harder. Right. And so I really came to that moment. I remember sitting in my car and being like, what do you really want? And I went back to, I was 19 and I realized there was this thing called being financially independent where you could have passive income enough to pay your bills. And I'm like, that's what I wanted. I do want a coaching practice, but more importantly, I want to be financially free and have the choice to go to work or not. And so, so that was like, okay. So I really put everything for my coaching practice down, and didn't, do any official, like you said, we're always using the law of attraction. So I put that all down, and followed inspiration, started having more fun in my life, doing the things that I wanted to do. And one day I was inspired to look up what the least expensive place in Denver was. I don't even know where that inspiration came from. I wasn't looking for it. Was just like, I wonder. Typed it in. And I don't think it was the least expensive, but a couple pages into the Zillow search or whatever it was, there was this condo. And I'm like, that's cute. And I called my realtor, like, let's go see it, because it was something I could do in that moment. And so we, financially. So we went to see it. And while we were looking at it, someone else put an offer on it. Which was fine.
Sounds like the real estate market today, actually.
It does. I know. In fact, like at this moment, that wasn't how it was working. But but seeing that place and the potential and connecting the dots of, I have money to invest in this place now. I can afford it, and adding up the dollar, like, I can make $300 a month, I think is what it was, and I could repeat that. And I already had a couple of investment properties that I had lived in before, but it just really was following that inspiration that put all these pieces in place. Like, you could do that. And you have enough, because I'd been really working on my money mindset at the same time, and doing a lot of things that I like only investing in my happiness. So I had a sizable savings account, and I'm like, I could do this a couple times and I'd be closer to paying my bills. Yeah. And so I just followed that path and the inspiration. And I came up against those things where, I didn't get the next condo, or the numbers didn't work, and I wasn't willing to go higher. They weren't willing to come up, and so it was an evolution. And then I found one, which was technically, I could have lived there and paid all my bills passively, but I didn't want to, I wanted more income than that. So, but that is a very powerful moment, because that was the moment, like, it's really a choice now if I go to work every day. And so I stayed about a year.
Was that like an eye opener at that point when you realized I really got that?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, this is possible now, because it wasn't that long after I asked myself, what do I really want? I mean, it was 6 to 8 months. It wasn't.
Yeah, that's pretty quick.
Yeah. And it was like, that's really is possible. Like, yeah. And in the process of buying that, the realtor hadn't brought the keys to closing. So my realtor and I had to go back and get the keys out of the lockbox so that I could have the keys. And we ran into a couple who was getting a 2-bedroom place. And I just started talking, and I hadn't even, again, thought about, 2-bedroom. And then I started looking it up, and I'm like, I want a 1-bedroom. I'm going to buy another 1-bedroom that pays the rent on a 2-bedroom. And just, left it open when I wasn't like, I didn't set up any searches. I wasn't diligently looking on the internet. But if something came up, I'd go look at it. And if it didn't feel good, I wouldn't do it. And then my sister happened to be looking for a place. And so a couple months after she was looking and I'm looking, I said, there's a lot of places that are old mansions that are broken up into different condos.
Oh,
maybe we should put our money together and see what else is possible.
Okay.
And so we looked at a place, and sure enough, she got her 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that she wanted with a yard. I had upstairs, which had its own entrance. It was a full condo, and I got the carriage house behind. So that carriage house, 1 bedroom, paid the entire mortgage and all the bills for my 2-bedroom place.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
That's exciting when that kind of thing comes together that way. And you went through barriers along the way. You kind of skimmed over that because I know you were trying to tell the story in a concise time frame. But the fact is, you run into these barriers along the way, and sometimes they're the ones that become the great big stumbling blocks. Did you run into any of those where for you it was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this next thing?
At that point, it was funny. I've answered this question a couple times this week. It was, it was just, I was so on the path. There was stumbling blocks, or there was things that could have felt like they weren't working, but I didn't give them that energy because it so felt like this is happening. I resonated with it. I was clear. I was in a patient place.
Yes.
There was no pushing, this has to be tomorrow, because almost once I knew, okay, this is what I want and this is what I'm going for, I completely relaxed because I wasn't pushing my business to be it. I could work out the numbers to figure out how it was going to happen, whether it was today or 30 years from now. I could work it out, and so it was really, there was times I didn't get the condo that I mentioned, which was, the official one. I only wanted to pay a certain price for it, and I made an offer and didn't get accepted. And I let it sit for a month, and then it came back and I was like, it's still there. And I'm like, it can work, it works with that. And so maybe there was a little bit of fear with that, but I didn't go, if I invest this much money, because it wasn't that much more, but then it felt right. And I took that step and I, did it. And so there were other things, every step is an opportunity to see that it's working, or just trust that it is working, So there were lots of condos that I saw that I was like, I don't like this one. That price is too high. The HOA is too high, and there's nothing you can do about that. There were lots probably is an exaggeration, but there was enough of those that there's an opportunity to get frustrated.
Right.
But and it doesn't mean that I never get frustrated now, but in that moment.
What, you're human?
But that was so certain that it was just like, okay, next. Okay, the next one. Which is always, I think, the best place to be when you're, law of attraction. Okay, that means it's working out. Oh, that means it's working out,
Absolutely. By the way, I am seeing, this is a podcast, so most of our listeners, 99% listen to a recording afterward, but I'm seeing a few people coming in on the live stream. If any of you have questions that you'd like me to ask Cassie on your behalf, just type them into the chat area. I'll be happy to do that. But in the meantime, until I see questions, I'm just going to keep going with my stuff because this is interesting. This is an interesting story that you're telling. And I think the biggest takeaway I've got so far is you didn't fall for those traps that lead us to feeling that we're blocked or feeling frustrated or anything like that. And I'm getting the idea that you didn't fall for them because you had a high level of trust for what we often call the inner being, that inner connection to source. It's like it's like you had this trust that went beyond trust. Like, yeah, totally, I get it. Let's go with that. Am I wrong? That seems like what was really going on for you.
In that moment, yeah. I think, as I mentioned sort of in the intro, I have very two distinct times of using the law of attraction. When I was doing it all wrong. And in that moment, I started doing it, quote unquote, right. And when I was doing it right, yeah. But if we go back to before that moment where I got on that path and surrendered to this is what I really want, I was looking for blocks. I was looking, so much so that's where one of my big realizations came about is, I was doing a session and that was clearing blocks. It could be setting your intentions or clearing things, whatever. And I had been trained in this particular thing, and so would a friend. So we would trade every other Friday or something. And she starts doing the session, and there are thousands of possibilities for how this session could go, because you muscle check. And so there's like 12 big things. And then within each big thing, there's probably 30 other things. And there's 100 in each of those sections. So there's a lot of opportunity. And we get about like 3 things in it. And she's like, didn't we do this last time? I said, yes.
Hey, recognition's half the battle.
Yeah, it is. And I'm like, exactly the same. Of this 120 beliefs, this is the belief that's coming up, And that was when I really started to look at, that was all kind of part of, I'm sure, this moment and letting go that came in the future. But I was like, I can't fix that I'm not attracting money in my business. I have to step into the person who is making money and the person who has what I want. There's only so many things that you can unblock or fix. You have to start living into that. And for me, that was a really big shift that probably led to that trust that came a couple months later.
Talk about that idea of stepping into that person. I love the phrasing, and I've heard a number of different ways of describing it, but I'm curious, when you think about that concept, how do you think about it?
Oh, I love this. So on a very sort of like a scientific level, I think of all the multiple possibilities, right?
Okay.
Probabilities. And so in my head, I have a visual of how this works, that, okay, I'm in this one and I'm going along, or I can step over here to this track and literally step in and see what's different, because the reality
so you
is
actually
different.
imagine yourself taking a physical step then.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And I do some other things with that when I do with my clients, but in my head, I'm like, okay, this is one track and this is the other track. And when I can physically step in here, I can see that reality. And it, takes time to practice, but I look around, okay, what am I thinking in this reality? What am I believing? What do I see? Because there's infinite things that we see, but our brain can't take them in. And so stepping in, I really see as choosing to step into that version of yourself that is who you want to be. I use it 5 years. I use a future self concept, and we work 5 years out, but really stepping in to that person, who you are in 5 years, and becoming more of them in your current reality every day.
Yeah. Who were some of your teachers?
A lot self-taught.
Okay.
So because
that's a good one. I mean,
Yeah.
that's more of that internal connection stuff. So hey, you're going right down the right path at that point.
Yeah, it is. Really the science parts. I started like attracts like, and I remember that in junior high science. I remember, studying things like visualization because I was an athlete. So my high school coach, to this day, she's about to retire, but she has visualized on her license plate. It has been there for 30 years. Yeah.
You had some pretty strong influences there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like that. And just, was always geared towards psychology, and I love visualization. I loved learning about studies, whether it was true or not. My psych teacher in junior high, he said that I'm a Bronco fan.
Okay.
And I was in high school when the Broncos won the Super Bowl. But what he said was, when Mike Shanahan had come, I remember this lesson in psychology, he said, he made the team stop saying, we want to go to the Super Bowl, and start saying we want to win. Like, we're going to win the Super Bowl. We're not going, we're going to win. And I remember that moment, like, oh, that's a shift. That's different.
A shift. Yeah. It has a different feel to it.
Yeah. And so really just studying and being an athlete and wanting to know, like, how do you use your brain to increase performance is really a lot where I've, learned a lot of that.
Very cool. Yeah, I like that. Well, I like especially the fact that you're so well self-taught. I find that many of the guests and co-hosts that I've had over the years who have a lot to contribute were self-taught. They learned this stuff on their own. Yeah. They picked, one of them, I don't know if you know David Strickle. He's a channeler. It's kind of similar to Esther Hicks bringing in Abraham. He channels the stream of David. But the way he described it was, when he was a kid, he realized he could do this, and he thought he had invented the law of attraction.
That's awesome.
I love that description.
Yes. Yeah.
But the simple fact is the ones who have learned it internally seem to
Mhm.
be the ones who are the best teachers because they're getting it directly from source. It's the raw, unvarnished information.
Yeah.
So yeah, congratulations to you for making that connection at an early age. That's really, really cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the Manifest 10K program that you put together. First of all, how it came about,
Yeah.
because you mentioned before we got going here that there was an inspired aspect to it. And then
Mhm.
tell us what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so in that, that time where I say I was doing the law of attraction wrong, what I was doing,
You are living wrong. What is
right?
wrong with you?
Pushing, I was at the same time opening my money mindset and really shifting that. And I was having success there, probably because, well, definitely because I wasn't pushing. I
Mm,
was just learning and opening to change and, seeing different stories. So some of my teachers, like Robert Kiyosaki has an impact on me. I went to T. Harbecker's event, things like that.
mhm.
Um, and really opened my mind like, oh, there's a different possibility with money. And I got really good at that. I remember setting intention one day, like I didn't know when raises came out. Like I didn't know there was like kind of a structure that normal companies have with like, I just said, I'd like to manifest a 20% raise. And I just said it. And a couple months later, I got a 20% raise. And it wasn't until like, being at the company, I realized like, oh, there's actually like that was pretty amazing. Like
Yeah.
there's
Mhm.
a structure to that. It doesn't just happen. You did that. And so as I kept increasing my money mindset and building that, it was about 6 months before I left my job. And I'd pretty much put coaching down, but I was talking to a friend with the intention I'd pick it back up when I had the space and the capacity and no longer had my job.
Mm.
And she was in a multi-level marketing company and she's just talking. She says, I don't know if people say they don't have the money because they were just trying to blow me off but not hurt my feelings, or they really don't have the money and I should help them. And I said, oh,
Mhm.
and I go, I could teach anyone. And I think it was like $300. And like, I could teach anyone how to manifest $300. Like it just popped out of nowhere, came out
Mhm.
of my mouth.
Sure.
And I said, I said, I'll make a program and then you can give them the program. And if they do it, they were serious. If they don't do it, they were just,
Yeah,
that was
right.
the nice way of saying no, thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so we got off the phone and I outlined the course, I outlined the course as it ended up being in the first revelation. And then I just put it down. And when I quit my job, even though I had enough passive income to pay my bills, there was just something. And I'm like, about not having a paycheck that I could tell my thoughts were not, I'm like, I got to get this under control.
Mm.
Otherwise, I
Mhm.
know where I'm going. And so I said, I'll write that program that I have and I'll do it first. I'll be the first person.
There you go.
And so I wrote that program. And along with that, I did a lot of scripting because what I knew from the times of pushing is I had gotten really familiar with being a coach who doesn't have a lot of clients and who doesn't sell a lot of programs. And I'm like, you have to get familiar with being a coach who has a lot of clients and who has people who are investing.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Stepping into it once again.
stepping into it. Yep. And I'm
Mhm.
like, you have to know what that feels like because now you don't. You have a lot of experience that is not that. And so I would script as I wrote that course. And when I released that course, I had 170 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a launch.
It is quite a launch.
A
Yeah.
first launch. That's whoa. And you were
Yeah.
scripting, you said.
So every day when I write the course, I would just open up a note on my computer and I just start with whatever came to mind. Like, oh, my course is awesome. People are manifesting so much money. People love it. I just heard Joan, say she manifested $1,000. I love it. And I just go and go and go until I came to a stop. And then I'd go back to writing the course.
Mhm.
And if at any point I got stuck writing the course or I didn't know, I had the outline, I wanted a story for each thing. And,
Sure.
but if I got to a point where I was like, I don't know what to write next, I would immediately go back to scripting. And
Really interesting.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so you were essentially, I don't know if you were doing this deliberately, but you were essentially reconnecting to source every time you came into a block.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, no wonder you're so successful. My God.
Right. Well, I always say that's why that course has an energy of its own. I mean, it has grown, but it came to, for those first 170 people and the ones that did it, like it had the energy. It started as a success because I'd already poured all of that connection into it and what I wanted it to be. Yeah. And so I wrote it and I said, okay, what's the investment going to be? And I just sat with it. And then it came to me, like, oh, people can pay 10% of whatever they manifest. And I said, okay, that feels good because it feels easy for people to say yes. And, I said to them, I'd get the question from my friends when I tell them who were kind of in the LOE, oh, what if someone doesn't pay? I'm like, I'm not worried. Like, I'm going to get paid. That's on them. That's their business, right? I'm not putting my energy into, oh, if someone gets this course for free. If someone agrees to pay and they don't pay, like that's all going to get sorted out in the universe. I need to have nothing to do with that.
It's not like the law of attraction stops operating when you're in business.
Right. Right. And I'm
going,
and I made $10,000 from that first launch. I had people that manifested $25,000.
Nice.
I had people that manifested $1,000.
Start. Wow.
Yeah.
First program out of the box. Bam.
Yeah.
Whoa.
First program doing it right.
Yeah. Well, sure.
Yeah. I had launched many programs. Then the most I'd ever had was 2 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was a breakthrough moment then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Now we do have some commentary and questions coming in here, so I'm going to throw them up. First one comes from Jane, although she says she's actually 3 people, Jane, Becky, and Amanda. They're all watching from Indianapolis. So Jane says, coaching for activating your future self now. You talk about visualizing your future self 5 years ahead. What if that is so different in 5 years? We'll have an empty nest. Now we have a kid in the house. Feels so far away.
Yeah. And this is great for people who are going to be empty nesters, because you want to step into what that's going to feel like. You want to know, and you don't want that, going back to kind of what we just talked about of, the experience of not having any clients to the experience of having clients. Like, you want to be choosing and directing that now, not getting to, oh, I'm an empty nester, I don't know what I'm going to do, and kind of going through that. Like, choosing and stepping into that right now and visualizing, okay, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What am I free to do? How am I connecting with my children differently? Right? How am I supporting them? How am I supporting myself differently? All of that is going to open up to pave that way. And that transition is going to be a lot easier because you've practiced it. You've been there. Yeah.
Got a comment. This is an interesting one, actually. This is from JB, who apparently has worked with you before. He says, well, please tell Cassie that I participated briefly in her Manifest Before You Pay program earlier in the year. And although it didn't work for me, I am very appreciative for her. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I hope you showed up to calls and got coaching and did all of that. And so you are welcome.
And then another Jay, this is Jeffrey, who's one of our regular listeners. He jumped in and said, I want to step into the life of an international writer/editor and adventurer with food, wine, and tarot.
Awesome.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. How can you do that right? Like, how can you do that today? What's one thing you can do today to step into that, to get that experience? We can't unknow experiences that we have. So any piece of that experience you can get is opening up and growing that. So I would just ask yourself, how can I get one piece of that today?
That's very good. When you are coaching people, do you coach them to do daily stuff?
Yeah. So our assignments are about 20 minutes a day.
Okay.
On average. So sometimes it might be a little longer. Sometimes in the future, we do some longer assignments, but I believe you can create everything you need in about 20 minutes a day.
So one of the things that I think all of us who have been in these circles for quite some time see a lot of is people complaining that, they did the visualization, they did the affirmations, they did this, that, and the other thing, and they're not getting what they wanted. They're getting the wrong thing. Was it like not 20 minutes?
I mean, there's so many things, right? And as a coach, and the more and more I coach, the more I see it. So there's people that are pushing so hard and they're doing like 100 things a day. And then they have 100 things they think they should do. And that's only kind of an exaggeration. Like I've seen lists that are like that long, say this many affirmations, visualize, do this, do that, all these things. And they're only getting maybe half of it done. And then they're spending all day judging themselves for not doing enough.
Yes.
Right. And so there's this doing it, like doing the work is it's a very interesting concept because, I think you can do it in 20 minutes a day, but it depends on what you do the rest of the day. Like, are you judging yourself or are you trusting yourself? And that's not something that's part of that stepping into. You can't put that on a list. You can't, you can, but it's not a check off item, right? And it's the thing that you start to do. And what I find with a lot of people, especially if they've consumed a lot of information, that they come and they're not fully present. Like if I give them an assignment, I can tell when there's like 3 different voices in their head about what they think the assignment should be, not what I actually wrote. It just happened with someone the other day. I even went back and I read it and I said, nowhere in it does it say, think about the negative thing. And I was pretty sure it didn't, but I always check to make sure, like, did I type something? Like, and because she was certain.
When you're scripting, you're basically coming, whatever comes to you, you're putting in there. Maybe you put something in, you didn't realize you put it in there. I mean, so you have to check. So
I check because I have tons of assignments, and I always look for, okay, did I say that? Could I make it clearer for them, right? And but what I could tell is that that's old information. She's taken old things before that said, take all these negative things and try and turn them positive. And I was saying, what have you built over time? And how do we pick out what we've created naturally in the last 90 days versus what do you still think is wrong and what do we need to change? And it happens so often. I think sometimes I'm a big advocate of having a coach because so often people think they're doing it, but they're not. They're doing it from their current self or their past self. They're not doing it from this person who's stepping in.
So what's the coach's job then in that situation?
To see that, to see, and to help them, for me, is to up-level their story. It's to see, okay, are you doing this based on your current self? Are you doing this on who you want to be? Because those are 2 different things. Are you opening up to what's possible, or are you just regurgitating more of the same?
So let's talk a little bit about that alternate self that we're trying to step into, because it's very clear with your method, that's like the cornerstone. That's where it all begins, ends. It's everything in between. It's all in that stepping into. So you're coaching somebody on stepping into. How do you get them to take that first step?
So I start with Manifest 10K. So we start by manifesting money. We start by creating that belief that it works. And so even in Manifest 10K, the way that we start stepping in is there'll be little exercises about just looking at money and becoming aware of how you feel, not trying to change it, just letting that awareness change, because awareness changes us. We do a fun little scavenger hunt to, okay, today you got to find a penny, nickel, dime, and then a quarter in that order. Right?
Okay.
So it becomes fun. We're not trying to, become a millionaire, have a millionaire mindset right now. We're interacting in the fun, the person that you want to be, because somebody who has a lot of money, if you think about it, has more money. They probably have more fun with money just by nature, right? If you're stressed about money, you're not having fun with it. If there's more than enough, if you have 10,
I can attest to that one. I know how that one feels, by the way.
Yeah, right. And so when that is in your bank account, so I start with $10,000 because it's big enough that you can't how it usually, but not so big that it's overloads your brain. And so if you had $10,000 in your bank account, you just look at things different. When you walk in a store, right, there's more options. So you give yourself more possibilities, whether you want to take them or not. Yeah. You're more open. right? Or if you want to invest in something, you feel that's more possible. And so I start small by just, it's not tricking your brain, but opening your brain in a way that circumvents that fear response of, oh my God, we're going to go be a millionaire. Like, no, we're just going to have some fun with money. We're just going to build a better relationship with money. And we start there. And then we get clear in the beginning too, so that we know where we're going, very clear about where we're going to invest the money, because that's also stepping into the person. A lot of people, this ties into your question, but a lot of people will ask for money and they don't recognize it's coming in.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I can tell you stories about that from my own experience, including stuff that I've documented here on the program.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know who Dan Mangena is, but he's also a money coach.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called The Money Game, and his is basically an incremental. You track $10 and 20 and 50, and you just keep building it up, that kind of thing. So I was doing his money game approach, and money would come in, and I wouldn't make the connection that it was part of what I was doing with playing the money game. And then I would fail to make the connection while talking on the show about the fact that I hadn't made the connection, except there was that one check that came. Oh my God, I actually did it. It was that kind of a thing that would happen. And it's happened like 2 or 3 times here on the show. So yeah, we totally get it. It happens.
Yeah. And so one of the people that's stepping in is the person who sees it, right? So we talk a lot about that, like paying attention. There's an assignment, like, so that it reminds her, okay, what, how you seen money in the last week, right? And so that stepping in to your future self, I build that foundation first because that is so important. I used to think you could just go into the future self workshop. I'm like, oh, it's cool. The future self workshop will take care of it. And what I realized, people who had completed Manifest 10K had a lot more success, and they stuck with the future self work more because they had built up all the trust muscles, the belief, all those things. They built the skill set in Manifest 10K.
Yeah.
And then, so to teach someone how to step in, we spend 3 days investing in your future self. Because what most people think is they like, oh, I want a new car, I want a new house, I want, love of my life, I want great health and whatever else, right? Maybe I want a dog. And they stay in that want. They're not, what does that life look like? What does it look like when I walk that dog around the neighborhood where my new house is? How am I feeling when I'm seeing this amazing view every day? Like, they're not tapped into that. They're not tapped into their senses. They're tapped into the I want. And so we invest a lot of time, 3 days, getting clear about who your future self is on all levels, the depth, what happens. So then that stepping in is a little bit easier because we have a very clear picture. You're not just somebody who wants a dog, a house, a car, health, and whatever the other thing I said was, but you're not just that person, right? Who has this one-dimensional list of things that you want. Right. You have a vision of somebody who's living a complete life. And that is easier to step into.
Now, I'm also going to ask a special case question because it's pertinent to me. This has been a situation with me for a long time. There are some people who literally have trouble creating images in their mind, and I'm one of them. They actually have a name for it now. They call it aphantasia. And when you're aphantasic, if you're lucky, you can create anything at all, like a color, but most of the time it's just black, nothing going on there at all. And what I learned over time is that, well, I don't have to rely just on my visual sense. I can also imagine sound. I can imagine touch, taste, and I can do those just fine. So that's been my kind of workaround. But I'm wondering, have you run into this, and how do you help people who are dealing with an aphantasic type experience to kind of get past? Well, you keep focusing on all this stuff that you can't doing it. You can't be doing it. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to make the vision. How do you get somebody past something like that?
So scripting, because I'm not it's always ironic because they say the first time I use visualization, but I don't use like quote unquote visualization, just seeing it. Scripting feels different to me than visualization.
So?
Because you're not conjuring up an image, you are looking at that reality.
Oh, okay.
Like you are inside that reality. So the same as you're looking at me on the screen, right? You can see that. When you're scripting, that's what happens. You're saying like, I saw the cosmic background. I heard waltz. I felt happy,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so you're in the experience, not trying to conjure it from somewhere in your brain. I think
Okay.
I couldn't conjure if I had to do my future self, like just visualize, like I couldn't do it. But
Interesting.
when I script it, I am in it.
So you're essentially creating the quote vision unquote by describing it.
Yes. Yeah. And being in it and tapping into those senses. Like
Mm-hmm.
senses are a very important thing when I teach
Oh, yeah.
scripting. Yeah.
And I imagine it's all five senses too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That
Yes.
full sensory experience.
Yes. Like, oh, I wish I could remember. One of my clients said to me the other day, I tasted the something was palpable. And I'm like, yes. And it was from her current life. It was like the luxury, I think, was palpable because I was interviewing her. I interview a lot of my clients about their journey, and she had just got back from this amazing vacation. And she was like, the luxury, like it was palpable. I could taste it.
When you're describing this, you're reminding me of the teachings of Neville Goddard. I don't know if you're familiar with Neville Goddard, but
Somewhat, yeah.
one of his key phrases that I always refer to, one of my co-hosts, Cindy Chavez, is the one who introduced me to him, and we ended up doing all of his books page by page. But the key phrase that comes from him is assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Yes.
And that's really what you're describing, I think. You're describing one of the ways that Goddard described it was, it's the difference between kind of in your mind seeing somebody climbing a ladder and actively walking up in your mind and climbing the ladder, putting your feet on the ladder and pulling your hands up the ladder and so forth. So you're actually part of the scene.
Yes. That nails it. That's what we do in scripting. And so, that vision of the ladder, we do that step by step of 3 days in the life of your future self. And then some other things. And so that stepping in becomes so easy because all the parts. You know what that feels like to climb the ladder, to get out of bed, to, go to
that really contributes to believability too, because you're the one who is actually creating that scene and then living out that scene in your mind in some way, either visually or touch or however way you're experiencing it. You're experiencing it in your mind as if it were actually happening. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a very powerful thing. This is very cool. So you start people off with a 3-day, I'm going to call it an introduction, because it sounds like it's like the first step is just that acclimation step. What happens after the 3 days? Where does it go after that?
Then there's 20 minutes assignment each day. So sometimes it's just scripting. It's scripting the things that we scripted. And sometimes it's really looking at, answering some of the future self questions, going on. So there's 4 future self questions that will eventually go through as you move through it. Does she do this? Or do they do this? Do they think this? Do they believe this? Do they own this? And so some of the assignments are going step by step through that and really paying extra attention to your thoughts and like, oh, does my future self think that? No. Or yes, and getting real excited and putting more energy into that. There's other assignments. So scripting is a big one. We do different variations of scripting. So we might change it up, and one day it might be only what you hear in your script, right? You just change it and you're only paying attention to that sense. What other? There's some very fun ones. Playlist, some things that people have heard of before. We make a vision board, but it's a vision board that is made differently. It's not just, oh, this is all what I want. It's make the collage of what this life looks like and what you look like living this life.
So in other words, use the vision board as a way to paint a picture of the life you're trying to create.
Yeah. From inside of it, right? And really it's always being inside. What does it look like? So if I went to your house and you had a bunch of pictures on a bulletin board, right? Create the vision board that looks like that.
Because I would call this the Marie Diamond version of vision boarding, if you remember that section from The Secret.
Yeah, I love that. I was actually listening to one of your episodes this morning, and I was like, oh yeah, I loved that scene. I love her.
She is terrific, no doubt about that. I want to go back to something that JB, who posted in the live stream, brought up, because he tried your program. He said he actually manifest what he's trying to get out of it, but he still appreciated the program. And I'm curious, when somebody is stumbling, I mean, in his case, it sounds like he kind of just quit the program. But when somebody's stumbling, how do you help them to stop stumble?
So that's why there's coaching now in Pay After You Manifest and Manifest 10K,
Hmm.
because of what I found, and especially as I started using better technology, I could see where people were falling off, and I did not like that because
Mm.
I knew it was a coaching thing. So, um,
When you say it's a coaching thing, what do you mean?
um, like if you had a coach, if you had someone to help you up level your story, see it differently, see your blind spot, that
Hmm.
you would keep going.
Okay.
You could keep manifesting, right?
Hmm.
And so the program isn't meant to be done anymore on your own. It's really meant like come to coaching calls. If you have a question, like come ask that. It's really meant to be, to get feedback. So in the beginning of the year, and I don't have a vision of who this person is, but people would get to the end of and I wouldn't have seen any assignments, and I'm like, you can't. If you don't show me your assignments, I can't coach your blind spots. I can't coach you when you're
Mm.
missing it. When I said, go down path A and you went down path Z to the nth degree, I can't help you get back on. And so when someone shows up, I'm trying to think of a question someone might bring. A lot of times it's, oh, what if it doesn't feel like it's happening?
Hmm.
Um, and we coach, like, very often you'll get an assignment to find more evidence, right? Find more it's happening. I'm trying to think of another question that came up today. No one
Well,
was in.
why are you going there? I'm going to go
Mhm.
back to what you just said because you said
Yeah.
something very interesting. Finding evidence that it's happening,
Yeah.
because that's not normally the reaction people typically have when they're bringing up the idea, well, it's not really happening. Well, I'm going to go find some evidence that it's happening. You don't hear that very often.
Yeah.
So talk about that for a second. That's
Yeah.
pretty important right there.
So my definition of evidence is, it's what's showing you what you want is on the way. So it's not
Hmm.
the thing, right? It's not the $10,000, but it's a sign that you see of $10,000. And so it's easy to go, oh, well, whatever, except for when you really understand what's happening and you're making your focus sharper on what you want. So
So you're not
see,
dismissing as much anymore.
yes, and you're seeing what you want. I mean, it's
Hmm.
already there.
Hmm.
You're just not seeing it because of where you're focused, because of the story in your head that I don't have $10,000. When
Hmm.
you start to see that $10,000 sign, that's a sign. When you start to hear somebody behind you at the bank talk about or with the teller talk about making a $10,000 transfer, it's getting closer. And
Hmm.
when you are becoming someone, because that's what manifesting, it's not just about it's about becoming the person who has those things. And when you're shifting from someone who does not have that to someone who does, it's a process. And so when you look for evidence that it's coming, you're amping up your belief and you're seeing the change in yourself. Like, oh, I never would have heard that before. I never would have heard, and it happens all the time with my client. They'll go,
Hmm.
yeah, I went to eat somewhere and they were talking about a $50,000 boat behind me, or making $100,000 investment. And they're like, I've never heard anything like that before. I've never heard anyone say that before. And so really when we're focused on this evidence,
I gotta throw this up on screen.
yeah.
Jeffrey says, I told my LOA friend the other day that I had $10,000 in my bank account, and you're talking about it right now.
See? Like,
That is great.
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And so you count that. You're like, I'm seeing it because that's what's happening. We're telling our brain all the time what we want it to find by the stories that we're telling. And so when we're telling someone there's $10,000 in my bank account, we're telling your brain, find the $10,000 as many times as you can. Right. And so counting that evidence is so important. And it's such an
Mm.
important muscle because when you become like an evidence machine, you're like looking for it all the time, which is how I am with, I have a podcast and my co-host and I talk about living loved, but like we'll call each other like, oh my God. And we'll be like, I saw a purple tiger. And like, the other person may or may not know how that ties into something that we're creating, but we're like, oh, that's awesome.
Hmm.
Because we're as excited about the evidence because we know we've built that muscle. Like it's
Hmm.
coming. If I'm
Hmm.
seeing this and I'm seeing this and I'm seeing this, it is right around the corner.
That's a really interesting approach. I like it. I mean, it certainly is it resonates intuitively. I think anybody
Mhm.
hearing that is going to say, yeah, well, of course. I mean, that makes so much sense. But how often do we actually go out of our way to create that muscle?
Right.
That's a very cool concept. I like that.
Thank you.
When somebody is expressing interest in what you're doing and what
Mhm.
you're offering and so forth, how do you guide them? How do you start them off? Is it just go for the 3-day program first, or I mean, is there a series of steps? Do they read a book? I mean, what's the way to get going on something like
I mean,
this?
if they know they're ready to get going, I would say jump in and manifest 10K
Mm-hmm.
and choose the path that supports your manifesting. So you can invest upfront, $1,000, or you can pay after you manifest, and that pay after you manifest contract is goes beyond the 10,000. So if you manifest winning the lottery of $1,000,000, you 100,000, right? If you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
only manifest $100, you $10.
Mm-hmm.
And so you pick the path that aligns with your manifesting what feels best to you. But that's
Mm-hmm.
really where to start, because you can't even take the 3-day course until you've completed Manifest 10K.
And when you talk about completing Manifest 10K, what
Mhm.
exactly is that? What I mean is it a course? What is it?
Yeah. So it's a course online,
Mm-hmm.
about 20 minutes a day. It
Mm-hmm.
starts with about 8 hours worth of pre work to really prime your brain to see this stuff, to start catching the stories you don't even know you're telling about money and
Mm-hmm.
upgrade those. And to really set you on the path to manifesting lots of money. So you do the pre work and then you get into the official Manifest 10K course. Once you've completed the pre work and you get into Manifest 10K, you also have access to coaching. So there's 4 coaching calls a week. So if you get stuck or having a problem, not understanding something, you get to come to one of those calls. Sometimes I will say, so there's daily assignments that are 20 minutes. You're doing an assignment in it's too hard, like it's not landing coaching over the computer. I'll say bring it to a call. We work through it together
Mm-hmm.
to get you to that best possible place. You can also listen to the recordings of calls, but basically you get in, it's a 20-minute assignment every day, 5 days a week. You do it, you show up to coaching calls. And the best part about the calls is coaching, but the better part is celebrating, telling how money's
Mm.
showing up. We talk about money. We talk about when money shows up. When we talk about when a penny shows up. We talk about when somebody, gives $10,000 or when they cross the $1,000,000 manifested mark. Like we talk about all of that. So you're in this space of it's happening, of a lot of people that it's happening for. And we celebrate evidence. People share evidence every day. People share it's happening. People gather evidence from hearing other people's stories. Like, oh, they just got a
Yes.
car. That's my evidence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah. Like Jeffrey
yeah,
talking about 10,000 and then hearing this particular show today. Yeah. Same
yeah,
deal.
yeah, absolutely. And so then you go through, and the course can be done in about 4 months. I would say the average is about 6 months, because people get
Okay.
to a place and they just need to grow into a little bit, or they decide to take it a little bit slower,
Mm-hmm.
which is all great, because when you slow down, you can really take it in.
It's a very good point too. Taking it in is most of what you're trying to do anyway. You're trying to absorb it. You're trying to make it part of who you are. So
Yes.
yeah, that makes total sense to do that. Now, everything we've talked about here has been
Mhm.
about the money side, and certainly, I mean, if our, I think anybody, if anybody talks about what the top 3 things are that people are trying to manifest in their life, money's probably at the top of that list. It
Mhm.
is like 9 times out of 10. There are other couple things that tend to show up a lot, though, and I'm curious: do you coach or help on those things? The 2 being relationships and health. Those are the
Yeah.
2 things that I think get a lot of attention. Is that part of the program? Is that like advanced studentry or something like that? But how
Yeah,
does that work for you?
absolutely. So what I have found is that when you shift your money story, which is when we start manifesting money and you start getting really good at that, because you're up leveling who you are, everything else changes.
Mm.
So there's like an automatic bonus of those 2 things getting better.
Hmm.
And I do coach on that. So I have a 3-day, the Future Self workshop. I have one that people can pick that is specifically about attracting a relationship
Hmm.
and the one that they want. So clients can do that. And my clients will do money one year and the relationship the next. And then health, we really do a couple of different ways. Because health is one of those things, if it's there, you're not focused on it for the most part. Sometimes, if you're really like an elite, or like I do have a client who is an amazing bicyclist and she's breaking all these records and proving different things. She's a health coach, right? But when people want to manifest health, it is generally because they feel in some way unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically.
And so what we do, we'll spread that in the future self. So like if you want to be able to walk without pain, if that's something that comes up when you're scripting your future self, you are in that place of feeling the absence of pain. So right when you're walking, you're focused on what's the beach smell like? What's, what flowers do you see? What sounds do you hear in the distance versus that pain? And that is how a lot of we shift health.
That makes a lot of sense too, because what you're really doing is you're shifting attention.
Yes.
When you change that attention, you're going to get different results. So without even knowing what the shift in attention is, you still know you're going to get different results. You just don't necessarily know what the results are going to be. But just the shift is going to do it. And that's huge where health is concerned.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah.
We only have a few, as usual, these hours fly right by, and we're down to the last few minutes here. I want to do two things. First, I want to give you the chance to tell people where they can find out about how to sign up for the Manifest 10K program, because there are going to be people who want to do that who are listening to the program today. And then I want to just touch on, you mentioned that in your on your website page, you mentioned how you have these bestseller books. Are there any particular books that you want to recommend that you've written that people might want to check out to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Manifest 10,000. I just brought a copy with me. Is great. It's the program in book form, and I had people manifest from this book. Like,
cool.
Yeah, I have a client who gave it to her friend, and she's manifested $10,000 time and time over. And she's like, ever since you gave me that book, I just keep manifesting another 10,000, another 10,000.
That's fun.
Yeah. So if that's, you want to explore, you want to know more about what the program is, make sure we vibe before you would want to get coaching on that. You can definitely grab that on Amazon. I have one called Double Your Business, which is about scripting and attracting that. And also Lifestyle Design for Champagne Life is all about scripting and about the 3 days that I do. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you can go there and tells you how to do it.
All right. And then how do they actually sign up for the Manifest 10K program?
Yes, you can go to payafteryoumanifest.com.
Ooh, I like that domain. Payafteryoumanifest.com. Ooh, that feels good.
Yeah, I like it too. I mean, I could give out cassieparks.com. You can get there, but it's just more fun to say pay after you manifest.
Payafteryoumanifest.com. Sure. Yeah. That's going to resonate with a lot of people, I think, especially, I mean, and I've been in the place, I'm not sure if you have too, but I've been in the place where there was no money, where there was deep debt, where you're terrified of money. That domain at that point in time would have gotten my attention. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
It would have got my attention in a big, big way. So yeah, payafteryoumanifest.com. Okay, sign me up. I'm ready.
Right? Yeah. It already takes that pressure off. You weren't, there's no added like, oh man, I paid for this, I have to manifest. And that's really, I know we manifest from the best feeling place. And if that is how it feels best to you, then I want to give that to people.
That's really, really cool. Well, this has been great. I have really enjoyed getting to know you and learning about what you do. And I love your story. I mean, you've had some really interesting and exciting things happening. So all I can think of to say is, let's stay in touch. We'll bring you back sometime I don't know, we'll figure something out to bring you back and to do another show. But thank you. This has been really great.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been so much fun.
Good, because that's the goal.
That's the goal, right?
Your daily dose of happy. So if we're helping you too, hey, another win for us here on LOA today. I love this. This is really good.
Amazing.
Well, you have the right attitude. You have the attitude that we're always looking for, which is, where's the joy? I mean, that's part of your finding the evidence thing, I think. That's where it really comes from. But man, you just have that in spades.
Thank you.
Chills running up and down my spine. I like that. So thank you, Cassie Parks. Thank you, live streamers, for all your contributions and sharings. Thank you especially to our podcast listeners everywhere, because without you, we wouldn't have a podcast. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.